What Was That Like contains adult language and content and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
I freaked out because I didn't know what to do. I didn't even have a phone.
Welcome to What Was That Like? I'm your host, Scott Johnson. This is the show where we talk to regular people just like you or just like me, who have found themselves in an extremely unusual situation. We'll hear their stories and get inside their head because we all want to know, what was that like? More information about each episode at whatwasthatlike.com. Here we go. Do you remember when you were young and you're going through your teenage years? Didn't time seem to go by a lot more slowly back then? All those years waiting and looking forward to that one big day when you're finally out on your own. Now that was something to be excited about, right? You'd have your own car, your own place. You could come and go whenever. You could stay up as late as you wanted. It'd be like heaven on earth. Of course, now that we're past that stage in life, we know that being out on your own and responsible for yourself is not always the paradise and freedom that we might have anticipated. My guest today, Terri, was right at that breakthrough stage, leaving home for the first time, being on her own, even moving hundreds of miles away. It was all very exciting. But then, as soon as she moved into her new place, the very first day she was there, actually, she found out that the real world can bring with it some unexpected and horrific things. It was a day she'll never forget, and she told me all about it. Hang around after the conversation, and I'll tell you about another podcast I recently discovered. And if you enjoy What Was That Like, please consider becoming a supporter. That not only tells me you love the podcast, it also means you get access to all the other bonus episodes that are only available to patrons. There are different levels of support, and all the details are at whatwasthatlike.com/support. And now, here's Terri. What was your age when this happened?
20. I was 20 years old.
20 years old. That's pretty young for something this crazy. I guess crazy is one word. It's not the only word to describe it, I suppose. Can you talk about where were you at in life when this happened? You just graduated high school, right?
Correct. So I graduated high school. I grew up I didn't totally grow up in a small town. My dad was in the Air Force, so we lived in a couple large cities in Arizona and Florida. And then when he retired from the service, we moved back to his hometown, which is Henniker, New Hampshire, small little town, about maybe 1,500 people. I graduated with a class of 22 kids. I mean, that tells you, how small it was. And we had kind of a crazy household. My parents had 6 kids in 7 years and 4 months' time. Between February 1958 and the twins were born in June of 65. So I'm the middle. My brother and I were in the middle, so I was sort of lost. I didn't have a lot of direction after high school. I did well in school, but I just didn't have the guidance from family or support that to sort of keep moving. I think it was just so many kids. My parents worked full time, and so I just was sort of searching for myself, and I just wanted to get out of the little town that I lived in.
When you described the little town, I kind of picture a Norman Rockwell painting.
Sort of. It sort of is.
Actually, wasn't he from New Hampshire?
I'm not sure. Massachusetts. I think it was, it was a town in Western Mass, I believe.
So you got out of New Hampshire. What did you do?
So I just decided, I'm going to gain my independence. I'm just going to take off and leave. And everyone was like, you're crazy. You can't just do that. You don't have a job. Where are you going to go and stuff? And I said, well, I have a brother that lives outside of New Orleans. He lives in Slidell. I can go down there and I can just start my whole new life. I'm 20 years old. I'm like king of the world, that kind of a deal. Like, nothing, when you're that young, I guess nothing really bothers you or you don't really think about it. so I decided to go, and I hopped in my car and I drove by myself down. I even stopped at the World's Fair on the way in Tennessee, which was hilarious that I did that. And then I got to my brother's, and I didn't have any job or anything. So I stayed there for a few weeks until I found a job in New Orleans. So that was the first step. So I found a job at a hot dog factory, which of all things.
A hot dog factory?
A hot dog factory. And before you say it, it was the cleanest place I've ever worked in my life. It was ridiculously clean. I worked in the lab there. I got a job. I don't know how I got it, but I got a job in this hot dog factory in the lab. So then I had to move to New Orleans. I had to find an apartment and move there. So I'd be closer because my brother lived about an hour away from the city. So that's where it all began.
So you found an apartment. What was this place like?
It was off of Magazine Street. It was called Phillip Street. It was in a decent neighborhood. It wasn't anything alarming. I didn't think, I mean, not that I was well versed on the city at that time, but it seemed like a nice apartment. It was sort of kind of like different houses close together. I don't know if they were exactly what would be called row houses or shotgun houses, but they were houses close together. And the apartment itself was you parked on the street and then you walked up a couple of steps and there was like a outside area, like a porch, and but I didn't really hang out on the porch. The apartment was like one big room that had a kitchenette, and then behind that had a bathroom, and then where you slept was a loft. So it was basically one huge, big room.
Mm-hmm. Like what you'd call a studio apartment, probably.
Yeah, studio. Yeah.
So this wasn't like a big apartment building. This was more like a house.
It was, yes. It was a house.
And how close, like when you talk about that front porch, how far was that from the street?
Probably about 8 feet or something like that. I mean, it was pretty close to the sidewalk or whatever, or to the sidewalk rather.
So you were right there.
Right there.
Okay.
Right, yeah, exactly. Right there.
Can you just tell us what happened that day that you moved in? Just take us through what happened.
Sure. So it was an August day. It was super hot. I just remember that. It was super hot. And I had basically everything I owned fit into like my car, so to speak. So it wasn't difficult to unpack everything. So I got there. It was probably about mid-afternoon, and I brought everything in. I parked my car, brought everything in, and unloaded everything. And kind of, once everything was done, I decided I would just sit down for a minute and take a break. Before I did that, I made sure that the front door was open so that the screen door would allow air to come in because it was, so hot. It's stifling. If you've ever been to New Orleans, it's really humid. And so I decided to sit down and now I'd only been there for maybe 2 hours max. And as I sat down, I was looking out the front door where the screen was, and I saw an older gentleman just walking by. So I, just noticed that and everything. Not a big deal. I'm still sitting there. This is before we had cell phones to like scroll through or anything. I don't even think I had a book back then. So just sitting there, probably drinking a glass of water. And then I heard a noise, and I'm looking straight out, and I hear a noise, and I see this guy running really fast, and I'm like, wow, that's really weird, right? Just like running, bolting. So
And the guy running was not the old man that you just saw.
No, and that's why I thought it was weird because I see this old man walking, and then maybe about 20 seconds later, this guy was running full speed. So I was sitting next to a window. So picture I'm sitting in a chair and it's next to a window, and I pull the curtain back and I look out the window to the side, and I see this man being hit, being assaulted. So my first instinct was, I jumped up. And I ran out the front door. And as I did, I saw the person that was running, the younger person, grabbing the guy's watch and running away. So all I saw from him was like a side profile, and then I saw him running away off in the distance very fast. And the guy was laying down there, blood. I mean, it was just, he was on the sidewalk, just, he was moaning at the time.
And this is the man you saw carrying the bag.
Exactly, the older man. So I freaked out because I didn't know what to do. I didn't even have a phone. I didn't even have a phone hooked up yet. So I couldn't even call the police. So I ran over to him, and then he's still moaning. So I started to run to all the doors, like all the neighbors, and I'm banging on their doors, and no one is answering. By now, it's because I moved in, it was like, say, 2, so it's like 4, so like maybe 5 o'clock or something like that in the afternoon. So finally, I bang on a door, and as I'm banging on the door, I look inside, and this family was sitting down to dinner, like, so they were at the table, and I just started crying. I'm screaming. I'm like, "There's a guy hurt. Call somebody. Call the police." And they immediately jumped up and called the police, and I'm assuming the ambulance. And I just ran back over to the gentleman who was still moaning, and I didn't really know what to do. Do I move him? What do I do? I mean, it was just something I'd never seen before. I mean, it was crazy.
Was he conscious or?
No, I don't think he was really I don't think he was conscious. Though he was moaning, I don't think he was aware of his surroundings at all. He was pretty out of it. So then maybe 3 minutes later, the police arrived. And that's where it was just really sad. So the police officer knelt down beside him, and he reached his hand under his head, and he said, there's a baseball-sized lump on the back of his head. And he then looks over and he goes, "This guy was hit with this, and it was a baseball bat with like nails sticking out of it." And I was like, "Oh my God," like I couldn't even believe it. I couldn't believe that this was all happening to me. I'd just been there for 2 hours. I mean, it was just crazy.
And before this, you had not even seen the bat.
No, I did not. I didn't even notice the bat. Like, I was just focused on him, and I didn't. And the guy, and when the police said, "Look, these are like 3-inch nails sticking out," I was just really focused on him, and I think I was in somewhat like shock. I don't know. I mean, just from where I came from, I'd never seen anything like this either.
That's what I'm thinking. A small town girl coming to the big city in the first day, and you see something like this, like it's like, wow, exactly. Is this what life is like here?
What did I get myself into? It was just surreal. That's all I can say. And then it got worse. The next thing that happened was sort of simultaneously, an ambulance showed up, but also an older woman came walking up. And then about 30 feet from where he was laying, she just let out a scream. That's my husband. That's my husband. And I, that was awful. Just, I guess she had walked behind him. I don't know if she had a few more errands to run, but he was ahead of her by probably 5-6 minutes. I mean, and that was just super sad. And, she just didn't know what to do. She's, this is my husband. This is my husband. So that was really hard to take right then.
Did you talk to her at all?
She actually handed me her groceries. She handed me her groceries, and it had like just some like beer and some other items. And she said, "Take these, just take these. I don't know why, but obviously, okay. So I just took him and I set him down, and then she was with him and stayed with him. And, when the ambulance came, she stayed with him and went with him to the hospital, or went with the police to the hospital, one or the other, but she didn't stay around, obviously.
Was she a neighbor there near you, or do you know how far she lived?
Apparently, yeah, she lived on that street. So she lived just down the street. They were walking home from like the local store, probably a mom and pop store. They were just walking home. So just like an average day, it was just, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, broad daylight. I mean,
When did you find out that he did not survive?
after this all happened, I sat on the steps to my place, and by now all the neighbors were coming out, and they're all, walking around and talking and everything. And so as I'm sitting there, a car, like just an unmarked car, like a sedan, pulls up and just parks right in the street. And these two gentlemen get out, and they were dressed in suits. And they walked right over to the stoop, and I, looked at me. I'm assuming maybe they thought that I would be the person. No, just because everyone was sort of directing all their questions towards me, all the neighbors and everything. I don't know. But they asked, who was here, who saw the crime? And everyone's pointing, she did. So
So you were likely the only witness.
I was the only witness. I was basically the sole witness. No one saw it because, I mean, afterwards I'm screaming, running on the door, running around trying to get help, and no one was even, no one was responding or around. So I definitely was the only witness to it. So they put me in their car. They're like, "We're the homicide detectives. This guy just died." And I was like, is this real? Like, wow. I didn't even know what to think. There I'm like this 20-year-old sitting in the back of the car on my first day describing what happened when a guy got murdered on my doorstep or on the sidewalk in front of my place. I mean, it was just, they asked me a lot of questions and I answered them to the best of my knowledge. The thing was, I couldn't really describe him. I could describe, but he was like average height, average weight. I could describe exactly what he was wearing. And to this day, I can see him running away. It was navy blue shorts with a white sleeveless t-shirt, almost like an undershirt, and just darting away. But I didn't really, I mean, he ran so fast, it wasn't like I got a really good look at him. So I let them know that, I can't like definitively identify this person because I saw him so fast, and I mostly, except for a little side when he was grabbing the watch, mostly I just saw him leaving. So it was like, taking off.
Well, when you were seeing this happening, it's not like you were trying to think, okay, I need to see what he looks like. Your brain was still processing what was even going on.
Right. Like, did the guy fall, or did the guy, I didn't really know at the time even what was going on. When I saw him pulling the watch off, that's when I knew that it was really bad. And I found out afterwards from the wife that he only, or I guess, I don't know if she said it. She must have said it then. Somehow, yeah, she must have said it when she dropped off the grocery, but he only had $2 on him. Now, I thought to myself, he got killed for $2, and then I thought to myself, well, what amount of money do you really need to get killed for? I mean, is there like a? But yeah, $2 in a wallet. I mean, it just, yeah, it was just
So you were able to tell the detectives what you saw, which was unfortunately probably didn't give them a lot to go on.
right, right. It didn't give him a lot to go on. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I wasn't, I had to. That was exactly what I saw. So, they took down all that information, and then they handed me their card. And they said, if you think of anything else, call us, but don't no matter what you do, don't talk to the press. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. I'm not going to talk to the press about this, So I didn't. So I went back up onto this, the stoop, and people were still, hanging out and talking. And
Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing that after it's all done, that the people that live around you, this is a weird way to meet your new neighbors, I guess, but it's something that everyone needs to talk about because it's so big.
right. I think that they felt like their area had really been invaded, and they needed to sort of sort it out with their own selves, and what exactly happened. I mean, it could have been any of them that just witnessed that. So I think for them it was really quite shocking as well, especially just just the time of the day, just being like dinner time kind of a deal. So we were there for quite a while, because then more people are coming home from work and they're doing so there's more people like gathering, and it stayed late at that time. Like it was summer, August, so it stays late.
The sun didn't set until later.
Right. So it wasn't like, there was nighttime and everyone was going to go in. And so, yeah, so we kept talking. And then a news truck pulls up, actually. And the person that was in the passenger seat of the news van or whatever, they said, what happened here? And I didn't say anything. nobody said anything. They said, does anybody, does anyone have to say anything? And I just said, no comment. I don't know if somebody said she's the one, because there was a lot of people around. She's the one. And I just, when they looked at me, I just said, I have no comment. I don't, because I just remembered what the detective said. He said, don't say anything to the press. And I was going to do what he said. I was 20 years old, but I'm going to do what they say. I was already scared. I wasn't going to, yeah. So I didn't do anything.
So they got nothing out of you. So they pieced together
Yeah.
what had happened, but
yeah, I don't know how, because I didn't talk to them, but they may have, just because there was people that were lingering around, that maybe somebody said something to them, because we were all talking about what did happen. So they were aware of that the person got mugged and that the person died, and they knew a few of the details just because I was just talking about it, but just to them, just to the neighbors, not to the press. I guess what anybody would do if they were in that situation, just everybody gather around talking about it.
sure, you have to talk it out. Absolutely.
Right.
I know on times when I have had something like this, not exactly like this, but something that causes an adrenaline surge, I've had trouble getting to sleep that night. How did you sleep?
Awful. I slept so bad. I tried to sleep. Every time the AC would come on, I just bolted up. And my door was, I think my door is not just locked. I think I put the chair in front of the door. I mean, it just freaked me out. So yeah, I did not sleep well at all that night. I just couldn't wait for daylight to come back up. But, again, then that brought on a whole new set of issues.
Right. So what happened the next morning?
So the next morning I got up and I thought to myself, I just want to see what happened here. Was this a big deal? Does this happen often? Everything. I went and grabbed a newspaper. I walked up to the local store, and I grabbed a newspaper, and I walked back and I sat there and I opened it up and I read about what had happened. And when it got to the part where they gave out my address and basically, I don't know, inferred that I was able to identify the assailant, now I'm really upset. I couldn't believe it. They had my address in there, and then it was just, just sort of inferring that I knew who had done this or could describe who had done this.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was.
And when something like that happens today, even the scene of the address of the crime, even if there's no witnesses, they don't put the actual address of the house. It's like the 1400 block of Magazine Street, something like that. But of course, back then, I guess personal identity and personal information, it wasn't at the forefront of everybody's mind like it is today. So there you saw in the newspaper your address identifying you as the person who could identify the killer.
Yeah, and they even put the person that died's address on there, and I also thought that was a little bit strange. But anyway, so I felt like now I'm in a real bind. And maybe 10 minutes after I opened up the newspaper and read that, along comes my landlord. So I'd only been there for one day, so he comes back and he just smiling as can be. He goes, "So, how was your first day?" And I just burst out crying. I just burst out crying and said, "Oh my gosh, you don't know what happened?" He goes, "What?" I showed him the newspaper. I said, "This happened on my first day. Somebody got killed right here on the sidewalk, right in front of our place. And I saw it." And he was just, "Whoa, no way," And I said, "Look," I just looked at him. I said, "I'm leaving. I have to leave." I had no place to go, but I was like, "I'll pack up my car. I have to leave. I can't stay here." They gave out my address. He was understanding to a point. He didn't even give me back my security deposit. I'm there for one day. This happens, and he takes the entire security deposit from me. And I don't know. I just thought that, like, in the end, to me, that's kind of a rough twist on top of everything. So at that point, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to leave. First, I called my brother, who lived in Slidell, and I said, "Look, this is what happened." And his first words were, "Do you think it might be time for you to go back home now?"
Back home meaning back north,
In New
right?
Hampshire. And I remember thinking, I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to be a failure. I already felt like I was a failure when I left high school and I didn't go to college and everything. And I just felt like if I went back right now, I'd be just a failure again. So I said, "No, I can't."
Well, you had to figure going from a little town to the big city, there's going to be trials and obstacles to overcome
Right.
and stuff like that. But boy, this has got to be more of a test than you ever expected.
Exactly. And what a test, right? So then he said, "Well, my cousin was going to go to Tulane Law School." So he he said, "Maybe you can room with her," because she had driven down with her boyfriend. I think he could have been her fiance at the time. I'm not quite sure, but they're married now. So I got a hold of her, and we decided we would get a place together and we would move in. So I did. I couldn't believe there was an out, but I was able to stay. And just for the ironic twist that she actually happened to be going to law school in Tulane. So we ended up getting a place together, a really small place, but what we thought was in a decent neighborhood. It's St. Charles Avenue. So
So that's how you got out of there.
so that's how I got out of there. I packed up all my stuff again. It only took me a little bit because I didn't have very much stuff. So put everything into the car, met up with her. We looked for a place, and then we moved in, and that was an interesting place as well.
Was the attacker ever caught, or do you know?
I had never found that information out. I tried to research that recently, but no, I don't believe so. And another thing is, I always thought of this as like an old man, but I realized he was only 56 years old. This is a man who was married with 10 grandchildren at 56 years old. I guess when you're 20, everybody seems to be a lot older than you are. But I mean, I'm 58 right now, and I'm thinking, wow, he was younger
Yeah,
than
that's
me.
not old.
Yeah, he was younger than me when he was killed for no reason, like just killed. It makes you it's very sad.
Yeah. It gives you stuff to think about, the big picture.
Right.
So you moved out, but then you had a couple other things happen in that New Orleans area
Right.
that were also not all that pleasant. What was that?
The next thing that happened was, well, it went pretty well for a while. I had a job. I liked my job. I did pretty well with it, and I learned a lot, and I worked with some really cool people. But then it was Mardi Gras, which I thought, this is great. I live right on St. Charles Ave. I've got parades every day coming by our house. And I thought, that's great. So it really was quite fun to be there during Mardi Gras. And I mean, it's just, if you've never done it, it's just something that you'll never forget. I mean, it's just crazy. It's fun. It's exciting. It's super pretty and all the costumes and everything. So we had gone through about maybe 10 days of parades, and it was the night before that Tuesday, and my cousin's boyfriend / fiance had come down from New Hampshire, and we all, ourselves and maybe about 3 or 4 other people, were going to head down to downtown. So we started to, I guess we probably took the trolley to get there, but we were just walking around, and we were walking down Canal Street, and we hadn't turned yet to go to where the main festivities were, but we were walking down Canal Street, and I got ahead of them. Somehow I got ahead of them by maybe about 50 feet or something, maybe even a little bit more. I don't know. I guess I was just like anxious. I was just kind of doing my own thing. I was also a fast walker, and maybe they were sort of, I was the only person. They had a group of people, and they were all couples. So I just sort of walked ahead of them. And when I went to cross one of the crosswalks, I was groped by a group of people. Like, they were groping everybody that was walking through. And I just kept walking through, and I was just groped, whatever. And so these other people, but all of a sudden, the police started running after the people who were doing this. And so there was maybe about a gang of, like, I want to say like 6 to 8 people that were doing this. They were just groping everybody that's walking across, because you're squeezed in so tight that you're kind of helpless. Like, if you did that, like, they could get away with it, because where are you going to turn? You can't do anything but still walk across the street. So they started running, and so they were knocking people out of the way, but instead of completely, like, just pushing me out of the way because they were running from the police, this one guy huge guy, takes his hand and puts it behind my neck and punches me right in the side of the head and just knocks me right to the ground. And I mean, it was crazy. It was like, but I wasn't the only one. As soon as the cops ran past and the crowd kind of like moved out, there was like 4 or 5 of us just like laying there in the street going, what just happened?
Did your friends see that happen to you?
No, they didn't, because they were further behind. And I think what happened was, I believe that they decided that when they saw the police and they saw the crowd kind of disperse like that, they just moved on and went to Pat O'Brien's or whatever. So I completely lost them. I could not find them, because now I get up and I, walking around trying to find them. I can't find them. I go to Pat O'Brien's. I'm looking for them there. They actually let me in. I couldn't believe it, because there's a line of about 100 people. Pat O'Brien's let me in to go look and see if I could find them, because I get, I was probably like teary-eyed or something. I look like I actually really did lose them. So I couldn't find him anywhere. So I ended up taking a taxi back to our apartment, and I got inside, and a couple hours later they came back, and I was like, look what happened to me. Look what happened to me. And they couldn't believe that had happened, that they were walking right behind me, and that they didn't see all that happened. But they were, well, maybe you shouldn't walk ahead of us next time and stuff like that. And they kind of put a little bit of blame on me, which for losing them, I do get that. I don't believe that I should have been knocked out over the head, but I mean, yeah.
I guess it's weird. In Mardi Gras, it's like no matter what happens, nobody's really all that surprised.
Right. And I think basically, from what I heard, the police are just trying to keep, like, that's why you can basically run around naked during Mardi Gras and no one's going to do anything. They just want to prevent violence. And, the police were on that. They did see that happening. They saw what they were doing to people walking across the street. Yeah. So that was the second thing that happened.
And there was even a third thing?
There was a third thing that happened. Somebody had hit my car, so I had no transportation for a while. So I basically used the trolley all the time from that point on. Not that point on, but probably for about 5 weeks or something, until I could find a new one. So I was taking the trolley home one night. So it was dark out this time, and I was just sitting on the trolley, and my stop came up, and I got off. And then this other guy got off too, and he's kind of a scrawny person, whatever. I didn't have any fear, but by now I was pretty aware of my surroundings when I was in New Orleans. I was pretty aware,
So you kind of saw this guy and thought, okay, if something happens, I can take him, right?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't think much of him, I guess. That's because he just got off the trolley and I went my way. Now, it's kind of hard to describe, but our apartment, it was like a small apartment building. It had like a corridor that was open air corridor that you would go through to get to your apartment. But if you were driving, you would drive around the parking lot. It had different place where you drove in and then you parked your cars. And it had maybe about 10 cars that parked there. So we had our own private parking spot. But I wasn't driving, so I just walked from the trolley straight through to my apartment. And I didn't really pay attention to where he was going. So I go to put my key in the door and I heard a noise. And I turn around and this guy was behind a car. He was behind a car. And when he saw me or noticed that I was looking around, he ducked down. So he's hiding in the parking lot watching me. And this to me, actually, this was so scary. Have you ever seen like a movie when the person can't get their key in the door?
Like every slasher movie ever made?
Yes. I couldn't get I was shaking so bad. I was trying to get the key in the door, but my hand was shaking so much because I knew he was maybe 20 feet away from me and he was watching me. So I finally, I got the thing in, I opened the door, I slammed the door, I put on the deadbolt, and I remember I walked to the bathroom and in the mirror, my face was ghost white. It was just solid white. Like I was so afraid. It was so scary. And then I realized my cousin hasn't returned from class yet. Oh my gosh. Now I'm really scared because now we have a guy hiding in the parking lot. She hasn't returned, and we don't have cell phones back then to warn people. And, I'm not going to go outside and wait for her, obviously. So maybe 20 minutes, a half hour later, she comes walking in, opens up, with the key with her door, comes in. And I remember I slammed the door behind her and I said, "Do you know what time it is? Do you know what's happening out there?" And she's looking at me like, "What's going on?" And then I had to explain to her. I felt like, I just couldn't. It was kind of in a way, sort of a comic relief, even though it wasn't funny, but the way that I treated her that night was just like a mom.
And of course, by that time, that guy was long gone, probably. He
Yeah,
didn't know somebody
yeah,
else was going to come home.
right.
So.
But of course, I was just paranoid for her, and I really cared for her. We're still like super close. So that was the third thing, and basically, I kind of say like 3 strikes and you're out. That was pretty much what I said to myself. I said, maybe it's time for me to venture back.
And how long overall had you been?
11 months.
Okay. You gave it the old college try.
I think I gave it the old college try. I was gone for 11 months, and I ventured back home, and I had moved a couple times since I ventured back home, and I moved to Tucson for a while, and my husband and I, after we got married, lived in New Orleans. But for the most part, I spent the last 26 of the 30 years I've been married living in Henniker, the small little town that I wanted to run away from, and embraced it and raised our children there and loved it. Sometimes I think you don't realize what you have until it's gone.
That's very true. Yeah, we raised our kids in Maine, even though we're in Florida now. And there's something about that New England type atmosphere that's just nice.
I agree. It was a nice place to raise our children. They grew up skiing at the local ski area right down the road or right up the road, and had great schools. They did really, really well. And this is a town also, so we have a child with autism, and we could not have lived in a better town than this. They have supported our son so much. We could not have done it without their support. So many friends, so many people who were just always looking out after him and wanting to help out and doing things for him. And so they were great.
Do you miss anything about the excitement of big city life?
Not really. We ended up leaving Henniker for our son. We moved into Concord, which is just 20 minutes away, just so that our son can walk around everywhere, because he doesn't drive. So he can walk to the banks, he can walk to the stores, he can walk to restaurants. So we did that. So we're in a little bit bigger of a place. But no, I work for a news station, so I kind of get all the excitement in in the 8 hours that I'm at work that I need.
Yeah, you kind of hear all the excitement and experience it vicariously rather than out your front door.
I think vicariously is definitely the key word there. I think at a distance. Yes, definitely. So I don't really miss it. The people were cool. I mean, it was a great city. The architecture is stunning. I went back there for our honeymoon. My husband and I went back there for our honeymoon for like 4 days, and we were going to bring our son and daughter a couple of years ago, but that got canceled out. But we plan on bringing them someday. So I think it's a beautiful city. I don't think it was really the city. I think it was just really bad luck and just being in the wrong place, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a lot of people live there and love it. Of course,
yeah.
They hadn't experienced what you had either on your first day there.
Yeah. It is pretty cool that I did stick it out for 11 months. You got to admit, now that I think about it, I could have just gone crying home.
Well, that's a great story. I'm glad you made it through anyway. And it's great to hear that you're enjoying life back in New Hampshire.
I do. Thank you very much. And thanks for letting me be on the podcast to tell this story.
Hey, just a couple more things before we head out the door. Would you like to get emails from me? I send one out every time I release a new episode, but there's other stuff in there that you might find interesting. I've recently come across a couple of absolutely amazing documentaries, and I talked about those in my email. And if I post an image on Instagram and it goes crazy, I might include that image in the email. Just cool, crazy stuff that strikes me as interesting. That email is where I'll tell you about it. You can sign up at whatwasthatlike.com/email. And check this out. I recently discovered a podcast that I'm pretty sure you're going to love. I don't know how I hadn't heard of it before. It's called The Trail Went Cold. It's in the true crime category, and the host, Robin Warder, lays out the details of unsolved cases. So to play out today's episode, I'll have Robin tell you about it. And I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks.
Hello everyone, this is Robin Warder, host of the true crime podcast, The Trail Went Cold. If you grew up watching the classic television show Unsolved Mysteries, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I profile a new unsolved murder or missing persons case and share all the baffling details. Afterward, I provide my own personal analysis and theories about what might have happened. This is a show for true crime buffs who are fascinated by cold cases and love to discuss them and pick them apart in an attempt to figure out the truth. So be sure to check out our podcast to learn about some truly bizarre unsolved mysteries where the trail went cold.